And it was the exact amount that I needed to pay rent. And I remember the first month of rent that I paid, this is actually wild. I only looked at this in retrospect. I made exactly $4,972 my first month of my gym. My rent was $4,972. And I remember working like a dog to get that. I'd never made money in my life. Like I'd never really asked anyone for money. And all of a sudden I had to come up with $5,000 in a month. And then at the end of the month, I watched it go to zero. And then I was like, I have to do it again. And that was when like the reality of the situation of like, there was no escape. There was no one who was going to come to save me. And I couldn't blame my dad. I couldn't blame my mom. I was the one who had chosen this life. But the alternative was that I had to go back to my father, a failure, and have him look me in the eyes and say, I told you. And come here, don't worry about it. I told you this gym stuff, this fitness stuff, this starting your own business, it's for later. It's fine. Just go back. Hey, you've got this great degree. Just go to the business school to do the thing. And I knew exactly what had happened. But what would have happened after that is that for the rest of my life, he would have had absolute authority over everything that I did. And that felt like death. And so that was what I ran away from when I was in that moment. Like whenever I felt like my back was against the wall and I didn't know what to do, and it felt like the Instagram reels of like the motivation weren't going to get me through what I was going through because no one cared that I was sleeping alone. I let them know I'm sleeping on the floor. And a month later, when you're still sleeping on the floor, everyone's like, don't care. Like, great, you're pursuing your dream, right? Early days. The must be easy mantra is the easiest indicator that you have a victim mindset. Because what it means is I can't achieve this thing because on some level, if you say must be easy, there's some level of desire that's there. You're like, I'd like to achieve some aspect of this. And then rather than feel the pain of saying that I'm inadequate or I'm not taking action, we cast our inadequacy on some outside object or some outside circumstance. And by doing that, we remove all agency and all power that we have over our lives. And for me, I would rather be somebody who has absolute power and have nothing to show for it than somebody who has all the things to show for it, but know that I'm life's bitch. The lack of certainty is what actually makes it worth it. And so here's my point. Let's consider the alternative, which is that you are on the path and you are guaranteed to know that you're going to get the outcome. All of the mystery is gone. There is no excitement, which is why they said, in the ancient Greeks would say that the gods always envied the mortals because their life was so ephemeral. They had so much chance that could happen to them, right? Where the gods always knew that they weren't going to die and it was completely guaranteed. And so what we do is we basically have this wish that if it actually came true, we would hate it even more than our current circumstance. If you knew that you were going to succeed, it wouldn't be worth doing to begin with. The fact that you are uncertain when you start is what makes it worthwhile. And the fallacy of being in the pursuit is the worry or the concern that it won't amount to anything because who you are becoming is the thing that you are amounting to in real time every day.
Stop complaining about the results you didn't get from the work you didn't put in. The only way to become more successful than most people is to be willing to do something most people aren't willing to do.
Charlie Munger, in one of his seminal speeches, he talks about how to guarantee failure, how to make sure that you are a failure. And he inverts the concept of success. It's like, what could you do to make sure that you were a failure? It's like, well, you would definitely get involved in drugs, drinking. He says, was it leverage, liquor, and women? That's the Charlie's big one, right? One of the ones that he has, I think he has 7 in his speech, is consistency. He's like, you have to make sure that you're inconsistent. He's like, because if you are consistent and you have none of the other attributes, he's like, you still might be successful. He's like, it's very tough for people who are consistent to not be successful. And he makes an especially pointed point about consistency because in my opinion, it's one of the most difficult of the virtues for humans to do because we're so attracted to novelty. I mean, I used to deal with this with, people on their diets all the time. I remember I ran gyms. And so someone would come in and I would always ask the question, so have you been following the meal plan? And then they would say, yes. And so then I started changing the way I asked the question. So I'd say, out of the 21 meals that you were supposed to eat, how many of the 21 did you have exactly the way it was on the meal plan? And then they would be like, oh, I mean, at least half. And they would say it as though that was a mark of success. And right now, the meal plan could be your content plan. It could be your showing up to work on time plan. It could be the time that you want to put towards your side hustle. It doesn't really matter. But if there's one muscle that you can flex, it's learning to do the same thing over and over again. Like one of the values that we had at Gym Launch is do the boring work. Because boring is what makes you rich. I have this timer that I have on my desk, which it's the easiest purchase you can make. I think it was like $7 on Amazon. It's a little twist kitchen timer. It's very easy. And it's been probably my biggest focus hack, to date, which is I turn it when I want to start working. And part of it allows me to think how long, I get better at predicting how long it's going to take me to do something. So I think this will take me 35 minutes. So I turn the clock to 35 and I click on. Then I start working on the thing. And the moment my phone rings or I look at Slack or whatever, I stop the timer. And so you actually see that your time on task is usually significantly significantly less than you think it is. And I think that in my early days, I would spend a very long time in front of a computer telling myself that I was working with very few minutes actually on task. And that's why I think that most things are actually significantly easier than people think they are. They just don't know how to try hard.
Consistency doesn't guarantee that you'll be successful, but not being consistent will guarantee that you won't reach success. Instead of spending time getting in the mood to work, just start working, confront the work. People think they need perfect conditions to start, when in reality, starting is the perfect condition. The Zeigarnik effect was a study originally done on servers in restaurants.
Okay.
And they realized, you've ever been at a restaurant and a server comes up and stands with their hands behind the back. You go, what would you like tonight, sir? And you say, I'll have the lobster roll and a glass of red wine and a blah, blah. And you're like, this motherfucker's not, he hasn't got a pen or a pad of paper, he's crazy. And then they go off, and what they realized was servers in restaurants were unbelievably good being able to recall exactly what a table's order was while that table's order was still open. So guys in table 16, they want to swap the peas out for a little bit of extra rice, and they're doing this thing. As soon as the table was closed, they couldn't remember any. So this is an open loop, closed loop system, and it's built into the brain. It just takes work, shitloads and shitloads of work. Every time I try and dress it up or cut a corner, I get brutally reminded the work just needs doing. The work doesn't care who you are, it just cares that it gets done.
I'm actually going to reverse quote David Goggins on this one. But I love this quote that he has, which he says, there's no shortcuts for you, David, or there's no shortcuts for you, Goggins. I heard him say that, and I just love that as a refrain, which is that a lot of people look for a shortcut. But the idea that you say, like, they're not for you, you don't get to use them. You are immune to shortcuts. I just love it because then it just further shortcuts the path to the work that needs to get done. Like, there's no shortcuts for you. I would say the one that I have two that are like my internal ones. One that is probably the most common is I will do what is required. And this work needs doing, and there's just no way around it. And it's just looking at the face of the work, and it's like smiling back at me like no one else is going to do it.
The more I listen to this, the better my life gets. If they don't have what you want, don't listen to what they say. There's no greater waste of time than justifying your actions to people who have a life you don't want.
So I was with a family member, and we were all around the kitchen table. It's during the holidays because I don't go home very much, and they kind of started attacking me. And they were like, I would never live your life. You're so unbalanced, like attacking. And I was like, what are you saying? And she said, I just would never do that. And I was like, all right, well, what part of my life is unbalanced? I was like, do you feel like my health is unbalanced? I was like, do you feel like my marriage is unbalanced? I was like, do you feel like my finances are unbalanced? I was like, what part of my life do you feel like is out of whack? She was like, I'm not as good with words as you are. And that was and I was like, okay, so the fact that you can't make a logical argument, I'm not going to continue how that conversation went. But the TLDR of that was I really thought a lot about it. And it came down to, I wouldn't live your life. And my response to that is, good, don't. When you have the friends who are telling you, must be nice, or you think you're better than us, or, so we can't drink anymore. That's when you can be like, yeah, then what? Well, then we wouldn't be friends. You're not going to be friends with them eventually anyways, I promise you.
Don't trade your self-respect for someone else's. It's easy to lose theirs and hard to get yours back. I think the winner's mindset sits in the uncomfortable place between two surface-level contradictions: extreme paranoia in the present and unshakable faith in the future. The tension between the two makes someone hard to beat today and hard to outlast tomorrow. The cynics get to be right, and the optimists get to be rich.
One of the biggest fallacies of the advice from people who are in your current situation is that they are right most of the time. When you bring a girl home, 99 times out of 100, when your parents say, she's not the girl, I don't like her, she won't last, they're right every single time, except for the one time it matters and you end up marrying the person, right? Like when they say like, you're not going to succeed, like this idea of yours, it's not going to last. And they're right every single time, except for the one time that matters, when you hit it big. And so it's one of those things where they are right more times, but they are not more right. The idea that when I die, people will be dividing up my asset, arguing over who gets what. There's going to be a caterer at my funeral. Some people won't make it because something came up and they got busy. And then the few people that are there are probably no one that I have in my life right now. And the fact that every single person that I have in my life might not even make it to the funeral to speak over me while I'm dead. It's like, why on earth would I listen to them while I'm alive? The single most important personal day of someone's life is someone's funeral. The one time you can pay your last respect, and they don't even do that. And so it's like, why would I give any weight to what these people are doing when they're not even going to be there on the day that matters most? And 6 months later, they're not even remember who I was. And anybody who's had a death in their family recently knows that in the moment it's terrible for you. And then 6 months later, life moves on. But the thing is that we just never paint ourselves as the person who dies. Intelligence means rate of learning. Like that's how, remember I talk about operationalizing words. So rate of learning is intelligence. So then which means it's a rate, not an attribute, as an aside, which then means you have to define learning. Learning means same condition, new behavior. So if I hold up a red card and then I slap you, and then I hold up a red card again, red, and then you duck, you've learned. If you wake up every day and life shows you a red card, and then you don't duck and you don't change, then you have learned nothing. And so if you go to a weekend and you go to a workshop, and then the next day you go back and you do the exact same activities in the same conditions, and you have no new behavior, it means you learned nothing. It also means you're stupid, because it means your rate of learning is slow. So if someone is intelligent, I can show them the red card, and on the first go, they change their behavior. And so by defining intelligence that way and defining learning that way, it allowed me to start thinking, well, I want to be smart. And this circumstance had this outcome last time. And so the next time I see this circumstance, this red card, I'm going to change my behavior. For me, that's why people see me as ruthless, as you said, because I'm willing to cut relationships. Because if I think that I'm going to eventually cut the relationship, then why would I not cut it today? Because I might as well start enjoying the benefits of cutting that relationship as soon as humanly possible.